Nikita, over to you, sorry.
Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Sorry.
You can go ahead.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fourth and final of the Regional Energy Dialogue. This week, we have been blessed with a number of rich discussions since Monday, when we kicked off with past Energy Ministers Dialogue. Then following into Tuesday, where we had our regional institution leaders. Yesterday, we had a very rich discussion with the utility managers who spoke about many of the issues and many of the opportunities that are related to the integration of viable renewable energy options into electricity grids. Today, we are having what we call an Innovation Leaders Dialogue. And it's called an Innovation Leaders Dialogue because we have with us a number of persons who are actually leading experts and thinkers within the issue of fuel cells and hydrogen. In fact, the hydrogen economy has been touted as the future of the energy sector, especially in Caribbean countries and other small island developing states, where there is a rich, if you want to call it, amount of renewable energy sources, much of which are variable, such as wind and solar, available. And the recognition that hydrogen can become an energy carrier that has a lot of opportunities to both store the renewable energy that is produced and also to port that renewable energy from place to place for integration into a multiplicity of sector is something that is very exciting to us. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of us who did degrees in chemistry like I did, this is exciting because, you know, it's similar to a child learning ABC. When you walk into a chemistry lecture, the first thing you learn about is hydrogen, the smallest, lightest element of the periodic table, the first element of the periodic table. And of course, naturally, you learn about hydrogen atoms and then the hydrogen molecule as an element, being the simplest element. For those like me too, who studied about chemical bonds, hydrogen was the perfect example of the chemical bond because it was two nucleus of one proton each, as we call them, that connects two electrons, which is really the description of what a chemical bond is in its simplest form. And being able to figure out from the fundamental principles how it is that we can apply the engineering arrangements for hydrogen to become useful to us in our energy applications, in our energy systems, in our day-to-day, if you want to call them, delivery of services, because energy, as we refer to it in the basic sense, is an ability to do work, is very exciting and very interesting to us. We have a number of persons whom will be introduced to you shortly, who are ranged from one who is if we want to call it an inventor, who has multiple patents, who have not just understood and worked on the systems, but actually designed and built fuel cells that are using hydrogen to produce electricity from renewable energy sources, including solar PV. And being able to see Mike Strisky, who will speak to us about some of those options that he would have worked on in the US and would have applied in some instances in Caribbean islands, is one that we find very exciting. We also have that is doing quite a bit of work within the context of CSEF and its representatives about some of those commercial applications that the company has developed, some of which are already working in countries near and dear to us. Already they have implemented systems in French Guiana, next door to Suriname, which is a CARICOM country, that is actually storing electricity from hybrid renewable energy power plants as a part of a hydrogen integration into their economy there in French Guiana. And they are doing work in Martinique. They are doing work also in looking at options in Barbados, and more importantly, closer to us, they are also working in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, being able to understand what our colleagues in other non-Caribbean countries are doing is an important part of our knowledge exchange and lessons learned within the context of the work that we do within CARICOM Energy. And as I mentioned, Trinidad and Tobago, we have Philip Julian of New Gen Energy, who will speak about one of the most innovative hydrogen applications that we have seen in a while. The use of, if you want to call it, waste energy that's available in from power generation. Typically, heat recovery is one of the most underutilized resources anywhere in the world, but more so in the Caribbean. We have not begun to tap into heat recovery as a source of energy. And Philip and his team have begun to think about and explore in a very serious way, to the extent where they are even at feasibility stage, heat recovery as an option for production of hydrogen, and then the integration of that hydrogen into the value chain of an hydrogen economy that includes industrial processes, as well as the potential possibility for utilizing hydrogen in power, in the power sector if necessary. So I will hand over shortly to Ruth Potop-Singh, Dr. Ruth Potop-Singh of the University of Technology, Jamaica. Ruth also has quite a bit of experience in the hydrogen sector. She will tell you about this. But Ruth comes to us with a wealth of experience spanning fossil fuels all the way to hydrogen. And for those who didn't know, before Ruth became a full-time academic, Ruth used to be the group managing director of what is called the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica. And do not let the name PCJ fool you, Petroleum Corporation fool you. The Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, or PCJ, was responsible for all things energy. It was a state agency that was responsible for all things energy in the country, and that ranged from oil and gas exploration, importation, refining, distribution, all these things related to the traditional and conventional fossils, but also things related to solar and wind. A lot of work that went into Wigton. In fact, Wigton Wind Farm in Jamaica started out as a part of the PCJ group, the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica group, and it was developed by the PCJ. And then of course there were quite a bit of work on bioenergy and hydrogen too. And Ruth migrated to the University of Technology, where she has been an associate vice president for a number of years. And Ruth, within that time, did quite a lot within the context of renewable energy and energy efficiency. In fact, even looking at work that eventually led to a solar PV system on the university campus, and did quite a bit of research with Brunei University and with University of the West Indies in Mona in Jamaica on the use of hydrogen, the production of hydrogen and its use as a cooking fuel in domestic residences and domestic homes in Jamaica. So at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, you didn't come to speak to me today, to hear me speak today. So I'm therefore going to turn you over to those people who can give you a lot in today's session and allow us to understand and appreciate where the future of CARICOM is in respect to energy. You know, if I was to look through a crystal ball and tell you where I see the energy sector going in 20 years from now, I would say that you would be in a it would be a situation where you would be able to have every single end user connected to what we could call distributed fuel cells that is running their businesses and their residences. And you simply would have delivered to you as required, when required, from distributed hydrogen fuel cell systems. Transportation is another area that hydrogen is very, very critical and important in. Hydrogen, you will understand from Mike's presentation, is already been integrated into the transport sector. There are hydrogen fuel cell cars. Japan has a lot of hydrogen filling stations, and there are other countries in the world too. Hydrogen fuel cell cars are already in commercial production. In fact, Toyota has made it clear that the future of its car business is not just electric vehicles in its usual form, but more so electric vehicles in the form of fuel cell electric vehicles. Fuel cell being, of course, a type of electronic process as compared to the usual electric vehicle wherein the battery simply provides electricity for the motors. You have fuel cells that provides onboard electricity through the hydrogen reaction that is producing electrons and pushing those electrons through the circuit to power your car. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's without further ado that I will hand over to Ruth, and with much excitement that I would say to you, please enjoy the session today as much as I know I will. And I want to use the opportunity already to thank you for having joined us for this dialogue series over the last 4 days. This was a pleasure spending it with you, and I look forward to continuing these dialogues in other forms in the future. Ruth, over to you.
Thank you, Devon, for your fulsome overview of today's panel discussion and for your kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. I am really delighted to be hosting this Innovators panel this morning on fuel cells and hydrogen as we conclude this CSEF 2020 week of discussions. Innovation is key to our sustainability in the Caribbean as we face diverse challenges, especially within the context of a global pandemic, while keeping focus on achieving a climate neutral energy system. The bottom line remains, however, that we make energy affordable, accessible, secure, reliable, clean, and sustainable, so we can have that enduring prosperity which we all aspire to. The CARICOM energy policy and roadmap has sought to guide the region, even as individual countries have charted their own course to achieve this. So advanced and innovative technologies are really driving change globally, and so the CARICOM region cannot be left behind. So exactly 5 years ago, as Devon mentioned, the University of Technology Jamaica hosted the first ever hydrogen conference in the Caribbean region. The highlight of the conference was to share the results of an EU co-funded project, which has a very long name, the application of solar-powered polymer membrane electrolyzers for the sustainable production of hydrogen gas for cooking. Quite a mouthful, but simply the production of hydrogen gas from water using solar power and utilizing the gas in a modified stove. The lead researcher, who was Dr. Earl Wilson, who I know is online, and I had the privilege of managing the project. Dr. Wilson was the lead researcher with his team. Several aspects were discussed, including the legislative and regulatory framework, because we also, in that partnership, had Brunel University, the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, the Ministry of Energy, and the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. So we were able to discuss various aspects of hydrogen, introducing hydrogen in the region. And we looked at cultural perceptions, for instance. The conclusion of the conference was that hydrogen would be promoted as a clean fuel and governments could be engaged to support the commercialization of projects to enable its widespread use. Well, a lot of that has not happened as yet, but we are delighted to be in this discussion today to learn about what our neighbors are doing. And we note that globally, the hydrogen economy has been rapidly advancing through new technologies and applications, deployment and commercialization, a lot of which you will hear about this morning. So there is an energy transformation happening in Europe using hydrogen as a fuel, as fuel cells, and as an energy store. We have very knowledgeable and experienced persons on the panel, as Devon has said, and who will inform you, they will excite you and provoke our thoughts and interests to opportunities for the Caribbean region. Our panelists are Mr. Mike Stritsky, an engineer, inventor, innovator, and business owner from the USA, Mr. Thibault Ménage, business development manager from HDF Energy RENEWSTABLE, France, Mr. Philip Julien, Managing Director of New Gen Energy Limited from Trinidad and Tobago. So we have you also, participants, some of you who are innovators. We have utility managers, researchers, climate specialists, policymakers, developers, students, and civil society. So we are very expectant about this panel discussion this morning. So how we will do this morning's program is each panelist will make a presentation, then we will have a conversation amongst them addressing specific issues and also address your questions. So please use the question and answer feature on your screen to send in your questions. So our first panelist is Mr. Mike Strisky, who I will now introduce more fully. Mike is a founder of the Hydrogen House project. He served as project engineer for over 16 years with the Office of Research and Technology in the New Jersey Department of Transportation, where he developed renewable energy technologies. The most noted of his projects was the use of hydrogen fuel cells in the DOTS variable message signs. Other high visibility projects included the Project Power Commute, an electric vehicle station car project, and 2 fuel cell vehicles, the New Jersey Venturer and the New Jersey Genesis. But interestingly, we are going to hear today from Mike, who converted his own home to run on solar hydrogen power, including a hydrogen vehicle fueling station. The home serves as a flagship prototype for his company, Systems, which designs and installs clean and renewable solar hydrogen systems for homes. Mike also designed a revolutionary aluminum solar panel mounting rack, which is easy to install on both rooftops and ground, cost-effective, and uses less material than most competitors. His company, Gen Mounts, has expanded rapidly, selling the mounting racks along with GPS-controlled pole-mounted solar trackers throughout the United States. Mike is undoubtedly an innovator, and we are very happy to have him present this morning on this panel discussion. Thank you. Mike?
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is not my first contact with the Caribbean, as I've done a couple of islands in the Caribbean over the last 10 years. Most notably, we've done Johnny Depp's Island. We've done a number of others. We looked at doing the island of Nevis. And this technology is now accelerating very rapidly worldwide. I've been doing this for 30 years. My home's been off-grid now going on 18 years. So in 3 months of the year, I provide cooking gas, heating gas, and fuel for my vehicle, all done from solar hydrogen that I make 3 months of the year. So basically, I'm able to bottle sunshine and use it whenever I want, weeks, months, years, centuries from now. And the reason hydrogen's getting all of this attention right now is the fact that it's 80% of every molecule in the universe, including us. We're made out of hydrogen because we're mostly made out of water. So anything organic, sewage, compost, grass clippings, food waste, pig ponds, anything organic can be converted into hydrogen. So we could take all the landfills and sewage treatment plants and turn them into our energy producing power plants. I've been working over the last 30 years in developing technologies that will implement the hydrogen economy. Now, advances in materials and in production means like no more platinum in the catalysts. We're using cobalt and nickel. All of these things and mass production are all attributing to the great reduction in prices and volumes that are out there. We're at the very beginning of the learning curve on this, and batteries are at the very end. So we're seeing great advances in fuel cells on a yearly basis. When I started out on this, 30 years ago, fuel cells were $600,000. Now these same fuel cells are 10 times the power, and they cost $11,000. So there's been great advances. I never thought in my lifetime I'd own a hydrogen fuel cell car. Yet I'm driving, I have my choice of picking any one of three. I can either drive the Honda Clarity, the Hyundai Nexo, or I decided on the the Toyota Mirai. So we're looking at, large companies going into production on these vehicles. There's no more chicken and the egg. Toyota has released 5,500 patents free to the world in order to jumpstart this technology. And they are betting the entire company on it. They have cities in Japan that are basically running on hydrogen, and they were going to do the Olympics this year totally on hydrogen if it weren't for this pandemic. But making my energy here only produces clean drinking water. My car makes 12 gallons of drinking water every tankful. And when I make my hydrogen, basically I'm only making pure oxygen. Nothing gets consumed in this process except photons. So for a whole number of reasons, hydrogen makes a lot of sense. This cures the disease, it doesn't treat it. And, there's going to be a huge economic boom for the world for people to create this equipment, to make it, to store it, to transport it, to use it. And this makes microgrids and renewable energy possible. The greatest problem with renewable energy was storage, and hydrogen has stored that. The utility companies here in the US have tried out batteries, and they've had many fires with deaths involved. Basically now they're seeing the light, and they're starting to go to hydrogen now for storage. It's the ultimate battery. You're not replacing it for 5 or 6 years. It doesn't end up in the ocean. So it starts as water, ends as water. Power the sun does the conversion. There's no wheels to well. It's delivered free every day to your doorstep. I mean, I've been living this in my hydrogen house for the last 18 years. I know it works. I've been trying to get this out to the world, and there are a lot more people helping me now. And, we're going to push this over the top. So I'm trying to let everyone in the world know that there are other alternatives. There's something else on the menu, and that menu is hydrogen. Now we're creating the devices to use it, store it. We just have to let the people know that there's a cure for this disease. Every manned mission since Apollo has used this technology for the last 70 years in the most hazardous environment known to man, which is called outer space, and continue to use it up to this day. So this is not something new. It's had 70 years of development, and we are now ready. We just need the will to do it, and we need the people to drive it. Right now, all we need is mass production, so we need people to adopt it. So the first goal is to educate people and let them know there's something else on the menu. So we're going to show a video that's basically was one of the first ones done. It was done by Discovery Science, and it was shown all over the world multiple times. But it basically illustrates how the hydrogen house worked in 2006. Now we're down to putting the entire system that took up my whole property in a box. Just like, computers started out as 4 buildings, and now, you have more computing power in your iPhone than you had in those 4 buildings. So that's how technology changes. Technology got us into this problem, and it'll get us out if we let it. So we're going to play the video, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, and just save your questions for the end. Okay, no volume, huh?
We work in them, play in them, live in them. But they also account for 45% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Now, a new green generation of scientists, architects, and engineers are radically rethinking how we build. And what they're coming up with will change your life.
Imagine flying over the city and seeing prairies instead of black rooftops.
From a smart building that actually responds and adjusts to your body, to a house powered by hydrogen gas made from tap water.
This is the ultimate energy system.
And air conditioning that runs entirely off the sun. Here are amazing building technologies which will transform the way we live. American home emits about 23,000 pounds of carbon dioxide and spends over $1,500 in utility bills, and that's not very good for you or me. But this home emits no carbon gases and will never have a gas or electric bill, which is why it's been called the most revolutionary house in America. And like the sun, it's powered by hydrogen.
Here, I want to show you something. Hi, my name is Mike Stritsky, and welcome to the nation's first solar hydrogen fuel cell powered home in North America.
Stritsky, a scientist and engineer with years of solar power experience under his belt, may just have the solution to global warming right here in these tanks. Well, kind of.
We're standing right in the middle of my storage area. These tanks hold 19,000 cubic feet of hydrogen, which is the equivalent of 56 gallons of propane or 40 gallons of gasoline. Yet this is enough energy with the solar and geothermal to power my home for an entire year. Cooking gas, heating gas, and fuel for the vehicle.
And where does Mike get all of this hydrogen? He makes it himself from ordinary tap water. But when most people think of hydrogen, they remember this, the Hindenburg.
Popular Science did a study a few years ago on what happened with the Hindenburg. The skin of the airship was coated with aluminum oxide, which is rocket fuel. So what people saw burning as the ship ignited was the aluminum oxide on the skin and the diesel tanks. Any hydrogen that was going to burn or escape went up in a tenth of a second. What you saw crashing coming down in this event, it wasn't the hydrogen, but apparently that instance has given hydrogen a bad rap.
It's the greatest of miracles that anyone came out of the disaster alive.
The tanks are not dangerous at all. If they were to have a leak, the hydrogen would travel at 45 miles an hour up into the atmosphere.
In truth, hydrogen is non-toxic, doesn't pollute, and is less flammable than gasoline.
This is the heart of the system. The electrolyzer takes water and it runs it through a deionizing process and reverse osmosis, and it feeds that chemically pure water into the electrolyzer. And this device here splits it off into hydrogen and oxygen.
The process is known as electrolysis and uses electricity to separate hydrogen and oxygen atoms from water molecules. And where does Mike get the power for his electrolyzer? The power is for free, courtesy of the sun. The average American home uses about 1,000 kilowatts of power per month, and Mike's photovoltaic cells provide about 1,000 kilowatts. But because Mike's made his house super efficient, that's 60% more power than he needs during the day. The extra electricity is stored by converting it to hydrogen.
This tank here has hydrogen in it.
The hydrogen can be converted back to electricity by putting it through a fuel cell.
You can see here is the individual fuel cell stacks.
Fuel cells are simply electrolysis in reverse, this time bringing hydrogen and oxygen back together to produce electricity.
The simple science to this home is that we're taking sunlight, converting it into electricity. We're storing excess electricity in the form of hydrogen using water. We recombine it again to get the electricity back. We're making water again, and the system is repeatable endless times. So this is a hydrogen vehicle.
What makes Mike's system really incredible is that it's all off-the-shelf technology.
This is the perfect energy system that nothing gets consumed except sunlight. And if we fail to have sunlight, we're all dead.
Mike has even built a hydrogen-powered car for himself. That's right. Mike hand builds hydrogen-powered cars as a hobby.
I'm taking the hydrogen that I generate for my fuel cell that powers my house, and I can fill my car right with the same hydrogen. When I built this car, I designed it that it could be plugged into a house in the event of a power failure, so I can always power my house with my car. How cool is that?
The price tag of Mike Stritsky's system is high, about $500,000. But like any prototype, the cost will come down as more of his systems are built. This backyard hydrogen system is still in the experimental stage, but if it proves to be nearly as efficient as Mike claims, it might just help save the planet, one house at a time.
Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed that short clip. That's what happened in 2006. So, I've made a lot of improvements since then. And, industry has continually, the auto industry in particular has continually invested in this technology, knowing that it was the cure to the environmental problems with vehicles. And, that's why all the major car makers are going toward this. Like I said, the problems with batteries is there's not enough lithium in the world to do a 0.25% of the vehicles. So instead of war over lithium, you now have war over oil, it's war over lithium. Since hydrogen's the most abundant element in the universe, we don't have that same problem. Batteries have a lifetime and they have disposal issues. Lithium-ion batteries are not recyclable. Since hydrogen can be made from almost anything, garbage, landfill gas, sewage, it can be made sourced almost anywhere in the world. And everywhere in the world, almost, you get sunlight and you have water if you're going to have, humans living there. So we have all the basics. People don't realize that this is a closed loop system. So once you make the water and put it in the system, you use it to split the water, make the hydrogen. Once the hydrogen is consumed by a fuel cell or burning it, you get the water back again. That can be put back into the electrolyzer again just to do a closed loop system. So nothing really gets consumed in this process except for whatever renewable energy, whether it's tidal, whether it's geothermal, whether it's solar or wind. So anything that you put in as a renewable resource, you can store hydrogen indefinitely. I mean, picture on these islands being able to store seasonal wind. Let's say you only get wind during the winter months, and you need it when you have your heavy loads during the summer months. You can store it all as hydrogen, and then you can get it back whenever you want, weeks, months, years, centuries from now. I have a small handheld fuel cell right here. All right, so this fuel cell can be taken on any aircraft in the world. They take these small cylinders filled with hydrogen and it stores forever. There's no shelf life. So you're looking at something that you can't take bottled water on, but you can't take bottled water on an aircraft, but you can take a hydrogen fuel cell. So that's how safe these things are. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years and we've never had anything close to an incident. If you have a release of hydrogen, it's 45 miles an hour into the atmosphere. It combines with water and comes down as rain. So we're looking at a fuel that is intrinsically much safer. Unlike natural gas or gasoline or any fuel that will lay on the ground, have ground level fumes and wait for an ignition source, hydrogen is gone. And that's why, every major automaker has adopted this because it is safe. All these vehicles have been crash tested. They've been dropped off tops of vehicles. They've been certified for driving in tunnels. They're parked in people's garages and they go down the road at 80 miles an hour. But the biggest advantage to this technology is it's seamless as far as refueling with a gasoline vehicle, only you're not dripping any gas on the ground and you'll never have a spill. So there are a lot of advantages to going to a hydrogen economy. My saying is that, oil companies now have to become energy companies. So, their shareholders don't care where the money comes from, long as it shows up in their bank account. And this technology will give them the ability never to have a dry hole and never to have an environmental cleanup like the Exxon Valdez or the Horizon. So this really is a new evolution in how we do things and, how we get rid of that 94% of the greenhouse gases caused by the transportation and building, part of the burning of the fossil fuels. We can keep reusing naturally recurring carbon in the atmosphere, through taking any kind of organic matter and recycling it. So fuel cells actually clean up the atmosphere. Hyundai's demonstrated that in a number of their videos. So I encourage everyone here to take a look at a series that Toyota has produced, called Powered by Everything, where they've powered their Toyota Mirai on everything from bullshit to lemonade. So, and water. So if you get time, take a look. Toyota's invested, and like I said, bet the farm on this technology. Europe is adopting this in mass scale, and they see this right now that, the battery vehicles may be able to do, the smaller cars, but they're never going to tow loaded, pickup trucks, SUVs, or large tractor trailers or trains, because you're carrying around 6 tons of batteries and you need a nuclear power plant in order to charge these things. And the time is so long, you have to swap them out. So electric trucks, and buses are never going to happen in reality. Fuel cells solve all of those problems. So, we have a chance to pick something that can actually cure the disease rather than treat it. As an engineer and a scientist and an inventor, I know this stuff works. The hardest message I ever had to do was to get the message out that something else exists, on the menu. So, I'm going to let you guys make up your own minds about this technology, but the science is all there. This is not fake news. And there are many big companies. I'm here in New Jersey, where Amazon right now is converting all of its distribution centers to do fuel cell forklifts. Plug Power stock is going through the roof because they're taking, 3 forklifts and they're making it 1. And they're getting rid of having to change out batteries, battery rooms, charge times, and the problem with the forklift running a lot slower when it gets to the end of the shift when the battery's depleted. Fuel cells put out the same amount of electricity down to the last liter of hydrogen. So you don't have a lot of the problems. You're looking at 25-year lifetimes. So this is definitely, the cure.
Everywhere bless you.
So, a lot of the things, how much more time do I have? Minute? Okay. So just to go over what's going on in the world right now, fuel cells, the president of Toyota made a statement about 8 months ago that fuel cells will be cheaper than Toyota Corolla engines this year. And you're saying, well, how can that be? Well, because they're now using cobalt and nickel and graphene to build the fuel cells and the electrolyzers, you're now taking out all the precious metals, which were the most expensive part. Catalysts used to be sprayed on. Now they're done with what's called vapor deposition. So they vaporize the catalyst and they float the membrane where it puts it on at 1 atom thick. And, you're now able to do 100 cells with the same platinum. You only used to do 1. So our manufacturing techniques are getting much, much better as we advance. So, if you look like where we started on cell phones to where we are now, there's a lot of room here for improvement, and more people are getting into the game, which means there are going to be more and more new discoveries. Making the hydrogen is going to be the last one. There were 3 miracles needed to do hydrogen, and we've solved them all except the last one, which is the infrastructure and adoption. It's like having the vaccine, but you got to get the people to take it in order for it to work.
Thank you so much, Mike. We have been treated to a very informative and practical application, and I know that this has piqued the interest of our participants. So moving right along, I'm going to ask Mr. Thibault Ménage to present next. I'll give him a more fulsome introduction. Mr. Ménage is responsible for the development of HDF Energy RENEWSTABLE, which is a copyright power plant solution, which is a hybrid renewable system using hydrogen storage to produce baseload power. And also this used for other large-scale hydrogen-related infrastructure projects in the Caribbean region. He has built up experience in the development of innovative large-scale energy projects, such as solar thermal for industrials and multi-megawatt hybrid energy systems. Thibault is a graduate of the Arts and French Engineering School and the EDHEC Business School. He also holds an MSc in Energy Systems and Project Management from the University of Melbourne, Australia, and is fluent in French, Spanish, and English. Thibault, over to you, please.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Ruth, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Mike, as well for the great presentation. I think I will use a bit of what you said to introduce what HDF is actually doing, if you don't mind. So basically, Mike touched based on how his awesome house would be working and how we would be producing hydrogen from intermittent sources of energy, such as solar, in order to either use it as a gas for cooking or many other application of the hydrogen, or use it for a fuel cell, which is basically the opposite chemical reaction of the electrolysis, as Mike perfectly explained. It actually produces electricity from this hydrogen. I have a little bit of a presentation here that I would like to share with you as well. I will touch base with actually what we are doing on a much larger scale within the Caribbean. So let me just like. Can you see my screen, Ruth? Could you confirm that the presentation is on? Yeah. All right. So I'll make a brief introduction to our company, which is HDF Energy, which stands for Hydrogène de France, which means like hydrogen from France, right? We have been working on the hydrogen a bit less than Mike, but like for the last 8 years, trying to develop a large-scale application of hydrogen, right? So our job is actually to develop such like solution on a multi-megawatt scale. So we have HDF Energy has two branches. So the first one would be the infrastructure development branch. And the second one is called HDF Industry. And it's actually a project that is being built right now, which is a factory to deliver large-scale fuel cells. We're talking here about like above 1 megawatt fuel cells that fit into a 40-foot container, right? The same type of like stacks that Mike touched based on, which if we put them together with the right balance of plant around it, you would be able to produce much more electricity for like stationary application. So this is the Caribbean region there with a little bit of a zoom on the islands of the Eastern Caribbean islands. HDF has been involved in several projects, large-scale projects in the region. So my message there is that there are some actual references in the Caribbean region when it comes to large-scale hydrogen-related projects. The projects that we have started developing are more on the French overseas, but still regionally in the Caribbean region, not in the CARICOM countries, but in the Caribbean region. And my job and my goal is actually to deploy them around like the CARICOM countries as well. So the first large-scale project that we have developed with the help of Europe is a CLEARGEN project. It is actually a very large-scale fuel cell, which is a 1 megawatt fuel cell that is inside the refinery, which is the refinery of SARA. SARA is a group owned by Group Sol and Group Rubis, which I think a lot of the viewers of this webinar would know because they are all distributors in the CARICOM countries. And this specific refinery now has a 1 megawatt fuel cell that you can see within this container there. That has been like developed and by HDF from scratch with the financial help of Europe, and is now owned by the refinery itself. So this one produces 7 gigawatt hour per year and benefits from a power purchase agreement. So the electricity that is actually sold is sold to the grid operator, which is EDF, and it just uses a hydrogen somewhere to deliver it into electricity form. The question is, where does this hydrogen comes from? The hydrogen is actually released inside the refinery within a gaseous mix that was burnt. Right now, there is what we call a pressure swing absorber that would just like take out the hydrogen from the rest of the gases, and this hydrogen is then purified, comes into the fuel cells, and then delivers some electricity. So that's there, as Mike was saying, that hydrogen is pretty much everywhere, and you can power a car from like anything that has some water. In this specific application, there was a decent amount of hydrogen that was produced and not valued. And there is no economy for hydrogen in Martinique, because the project is in Martinique, we would just like transform this hydrogen directly into electricity. So this one has been like inaugurated end of 2019, so it runs. It has, I wish we had like more visibility from the CARICOM countries when we inaugurated this specific project, but it shows that yes, there is like there are some application of use of hydrogen to decarbonize the economy, because the 1 megawatt that you put into the grid is a 1 megawatt that you consume, that you don't consume for like fuel to produce like electricity on the grid, right? So this is the CLEARGEN project. I invite you to have a look on the internet. It's called CLEARGEN.eu because it's a EU project implemented by HDF. So just to give you a bit of a perspective of how big this project is, we're looking at the two 40-foot containers that are right there with the swing pressure absorber, which are the vertical containers that you can see right next to them within this refinery. So that speaks to itself when it comes to safety. I think Mike touched base as well on the safety perception of the people in general, right? Like everybody would come to a chemistry class in high school and would just like, we would highlight the fact that there is some hydrogen with like a small burst, right? So everybody thinks that hydrogen is just like something that is extremely dangerous and can blow up. Mike says so. It is extremely light. It goes in the air, like in the atmosphere extremely quickly and just like disappears, right? So it's flammable, but the flame is extremely rapid and it just goes out. In terms of safety here, this project has been implemented within the refinery, and the restriction when it comes to implementing that type of project with pure hydrogen stream within a refinery speaks to itself when it comes to safety. We had to follow the European guidelines for like such projects, conduct the hazard study and so on. But not only, there was like additional constraints when it comes to civil engineering, and there was some tougher regulation imposed by the refinery itself. So it had to be able to sustain extremely high wind speeds, so category 5 hurricane, category 5 earthquake as well. And this project has been like successfully implemented. So it is the 3D representation from the top, where you see the two modules of like 0.5 megawatt. These fuel cells are actually provided and assembled by Ballard System. Ballard System is actually the let's say the top the top fuel cell provider as we speak, and they equip a lot of the hydrogen vehicles and hydrogen buses in the world. They're Canadian, and they've been working on like fuel cells for a long time now, investing a lot of money. And now that hydrogen mobility is taking up, we see like huge economy of scales happening, right? So this was the first reference that I wanted to touch base on the Caribbean region that HDF has been implementing. It's something that we could duplicate if there is a specific site that actually has hydrogen in excess and there is no direct end user for that. So transforming it into electricity would directly make sense to like have a let's say waste hydrogen valued through electricity use. So Ruth, when doing the introduction, said that I was responsible for the development of the RENEWSTABLE power plant solution in the Caribbean, right? So the RENEWSTABLE power plant is what HDF is aiming at, like developing and duplicating within the Caribbean region, including the CARICOM countries. So as we all know, and I think it was highlighted in the previous conferences of this energy dialogue, the main problem of the renewable energy, solar and wind, are the fact that they are intermittent. And the more you push with their integration, the more you need like inside investment in order to like incorporate them within the grid and keeping a stable frequency and voltage, which means that basically you need to sustain a good energy service at all time, right? So what we do is that we decided why not use these sources of energy that are extremely mature and like combine it with some storage in order to deliver electricity day and night, right? So this way it could be like deployed anywhere to provide what we call baseload electricity. Unfortunately, the battery storage are not able to deliver some electricity for more than 4 hours. So if you want then to increase the amount of energy that is required, like a night would be 14 hours, right? You need to just like oversize the battery just to use the energy component of it and not the power component of it. The beauty of hydrogen is that you have 3 main components. You have the electrolyzer, which would be like transforming electricity and water into hydrogen. You have the hydrogen tanks, which looks exactly like Mike's hydrogen tanks in its garden, which are like big like cylinders, vertical or horizontal cylinders, like storing the hydrogen. And you have hydrogen fuel cells, and basically hydrogen fuel cells are the one that you just saw within 40-foot container that can deliver electricity from this hydrogen that have been like stored, right? So the idea is that the electrolyzer would be the power input of your storage. The hydrogen tanks, how many of them you put, would be your energy component of the storage, and the hydrogen fuel cell would be your power output of the storage. So this way you can like add more hydrogen tanks so you can store daily, weekly energy, right? Our business model, for like economic reasons, is based on using the hydrogen storage for 1 or 2 days, right? In order to deliver 1 or 2 nights. So we have a smart combination of like a solar intermittent, very mature technology, a battery storage that can like respond extremely quickly and deliver some support for the grid, especially at the end of the day peak when most of the power is needed. And then a long-term energy hydrogen storage that would like reuse some of the solar power, which is intermittent during the day, and deliver it at night. So this way we can produce electricity 24/7 for the grid, right? And we are about to announce the financial close of this type of project, the first of a kind, the first RENEWSTABLE that scale in French Guiana, which is basically $130 million project combining solar, batteries, and hydrogen. And it would deliver 10 megawatt during the day and 3 megawatt during the night. And when I say daytime, it's not only the daytime when the sun shines, but it's also when there's some clouds, and it's also at the end of the day peak. So when the sun is not there anymore, because the utility there was like eager to have some additional decarbonized power at the end of the day peak when it's the most critical, right? So basically we provide you would provide 10 megawatt from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and 3 megawatt from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., right? With an availability over the service that exceeds 85%. So this is like comparable to a diesel power plant. It just, the difference is that there's 2 levels of generation, which are designed by the different like optimization of each component and economics, right? And we are going to be actually less expensive than the light fuel oil power plants right next to them, right? So the idea is that there we have a stable solution that is also renewable, and we call that a RENEWSTABLE power plant. That being said, and that shows another thing, because we have big equity partners on board, which is Meridiam, a huge infrastructure fund, and the SARA, which is the same refinery owned by Group Sol and Group Rubis, that are as well equity owner in the project. And because we have had offers from like lenders at like 5 times what was proposed, it shows, and within those lenders, we have institutional banks, we have like huge commercial banks. It shows how bankable the solution is, the business model and the technology as well. So, I mean, the solar part is something that we see everywhere. Batteries are being more and more deployed all around the world. They account for 98% of the investment in the storage world. But the hydrogen storage is what could make, people a bit, is it very mature or not? It is actually mature. And if you find a right business model for using that storage, it is completely something that can be bankable. And we demonstrate that through this huge project that we are already duplicating in like other places around the world. So we have development in Latin America, we have development ongoing in Indonesia and in some of the islands of Europe. And that makes a lot of sense on the islands that actually are not interconnected grids, right? Because this is where the intermittency of renewable energy, such as solar and wind, are especially critical when ramping up their penetration within a grid, right? So I've been working on the development of similar projects in Barbados for the last 2 years. It is moving forward. We are we have the authorizations to launch the environmental impact assessment and hazard studies. It's the same sizing. We have like some support from the IDB Invest, some support for the Europe in it, and there's a lot of like work to be done in order to reach the financial close. But it is something that is moving forward, and that there is a real interest from BLPC, from Barbados Light and Power Company, to get some of these decarbonized base load for the grid, right? As they move forward with the 100% renewable energy target by 2030. I know I'm running out of time, but there's another project that we work on in Guadeloupe, which is a bit north of Martinique. We have designed a project with a certain number of partners, local partners, and the idea there is to develop a solar power plant, create some hydrogen, use the hydrogen for two reasons. One, for the fuel cells that would just run when the electricity is extremely expensive, and would like replace the single gas turbines that are actually inefficient and very expensive. So especially at the end of the day peak. And the rest of the hydrogen would like go into a hydrogen fueling station, and it would be a deployment of 10 buses in order to travel Guadeloupe. Just a reminder, an electrical bus has an autonomy of like 150 to 100 kilometers. A hydrogen bus can easily reach like 800 kilometers. When you have a look at the size of the islands and the deployment of decarbonized buses, you have to wonder if you want to go with hydrogen buses or electrical buses. Ruth, I don't know if I have much more time. I can't hear you.
2 minutes.
All right. I just try to stick with the time so we have time to answer the question, which I think is the most interesting part.
Great.
And that's our plan for building some fuel cells in Bordeaux, actually in France, where I live. So the idea there is that we have signed a big partnership with Ballard System for technology transfer in order to industrialize the integration of the membranes, that the fuel cell stack, the core components together in order to make them more compact and way less expensive, because there's a lot of, like, when you want to have a very large scale fuel cell, there's a lot of like costs related to the integration of those that are like assembled like a Rolls-Royce, right? And you want it to be assembled like a like a Toyota, extremely automatized, and this is where you cut the cost, right, with volumes. And that's what Mike touched based on, right? So we have a plan for developing this specific industry in France. It's heavily supported by the French government at the moment. We have a memorandum of understanding as well with ABB Marine that wants to equip its own like cruise ship, like in high like ocean going like vessels with fuel cells, because they are constrained with new regulation that doesn't allow them to like burn heavy fuel oil within certain territories like Antarctica, and I believe it might be the case in the Caribbean at some point, right? So we are designing this specific 1.5 megawatt fuel cells for both stationary application, which would serve application like our power plant projects, and also to equip at the same time these ocean-going vessels, right? This is very short time for me to explain you what we are developing in the region, and there's many more opportunities that we're working on at the moment. My two key messages there is that it is already implemented in your region first, and the second is that there are projects in development that are bankable. And I think there is a big threat around the fact that the technology is not mature, but you can ask Mike for that if his house is going well now. It is, technology speaking, it is extremely mature. There's a lot of industries that have been using the hydrogen. Philip will touch base on this. Like the ammonia sector in Trinidad and Tobago is extremely familiar with like using pure stream of hydrogen, because this is in the process of making methanol and ammonia. So this is extremely mature. And now, economically speaking, because of the volumes and the fact that the automotive industry is now fully investing in it, we see the prices decreasing extremely quickly. And we see already that on our RENEWSTABLE power plant project, we are competitive with diesel power plants, with light fuel oil powered power plants, right? So I will leave that to Philip. Then I don't want to take his time, because he has a very, very interesting project to present, and HDF has been working a bit on this project as well for the last 5 months. So stay online, because there's good development happening in this sector in Trinidad and Tobago, led by the extraordinary team of Philip, right? Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you have a lot of questions that I can maybe answer, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Thibault.
Yeah.
Right. So our third presenter is Mr. Philip Julian, who has been partially introduced by Thibault. But Philip is from born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, in Trinidad, and he continued his tertiary education in Canada, graduating from McGill University in Montreal, Canada, with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a minor in environmental engineering. So after working in the Canadian engineering consulting sector, he returned to Trinidad in 2001 and has been integrally involved in project development and consulting activities in the local energy sector there. After serving for 5 years in the as the location director for Worley Parsons in Trinidad, he assumed the role as managing director of Chemistry Systems Limited. Philip is also the founder of the Heroes Foundation, a registered not-for-profit non-governmental organization, which was established in 2002 in Trinidad and Tobago, Create the Next Generation Heroes. But Philip comes to us this morning as the CEO of New Energy Generation, New Gen Energy. And Philip is now embarking on a new project. So it's a very exciting project. Whereas we heard from Mike and Thibault, who really have installed projects in the Caribbean, and quite an impressive array of projects indeed. I mean, we heard Mike that he has done solar houses in the Cayman Islands, in the Bahamas, as well as the USA. And Mike and Thibault spoke to us about the projects that have been developed in Guadeloupe and Martinique, some that are coming on stream in French Guiana and Barbados. As a Jamaican, I'm a little jealous, I can tell you that. So we have to, this dialogue is very important for us within the region. And thanks again to Devon Gardner, who has been pioneering these events for us to be not just educated, but be provoked into doing something for our own countries as we seek to have a carbon neutral energy sector. So over to you, Philip. Thank you again for being a member of this panel.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ruth, and good morning to everyone. I have to say, even though I've been focused in the hydrogen industry for the past couple of years, there's always so much to learn. I mean, I've learned so much from listening to Mike, and of course, my good friend Thibault, who, as you mentioned, has been a partner with the New Gen Initiative for the past few months. It just goes to show that what you said, Ruth, is, I like that word, being provoked, because I think the more you listen, the more you learn, the more opportunities present themselves. And in the case of New Gen, really, I think to build off the conversation from Mike and Thibault, as you'll see as we get into it, it really very much is in that space of the utilization of carbon neutral electricity for the generation of clean and green hydrogen. As we get into the presentation, you'll see, the one thing Trinidad is not lacking is a need or a demand for hydrogen. And the underlying, I would say, realization of why the prospects of this is so powerful in Trinidad is because there is quite simply a business imperative to secure additional sources of hydrogen for the future industrial sector or energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago. So with that backdrop being set, I will share my screen. I will assume that everyone is seeing it successfully. Let me know if you're not. And as I said, I guess to add on to the story that's been shared, this fundamentally at its heart is an energy efficiency project. Trinidad, as you'll see, has significant sources of excess or waste heat that has us in the place where we can generate over 175 megawatts of carbon neutral electricity without consuming a single extra molecule of natural gas. And that is very significant for us, given our natural gas history. So just as a very quick backdrop about New Gen, we do see ourselves as that catalyst of thinking and of doing to enable this new energy for a new generation. A generation that is in service of this decarbonized era that the whole world is moving into. And New Gen sees itself as an energy transition pioneer through the advocacy and implementation of a large-scale hydrogen production facility that we see being the catalyst to drive Trinidad and Tobago, and I dare say the region, into embracing a very real hydrogen economy. And that's why I'm so excited to be, one of the reasons I'm excited to be here today. So just to build off what I just said, why hydrogen? Why is this such a big deal for Trinidad and Tobago? Well, it stems from what I alluded to earlier, that historically we have been very successful in the utilization of natural gas, of our country's precious reserves of natural gas, in the monetization of those resources in the forms of ammonia, methanol, and LNG. We've been known as the largest exporter of ammonia and methanol, and one of the top 10 exporters of LNG. And very interestingly, if you look at this part of the slide, we have over 2 gigawatts of installed power capacity. We're very blessed to have an overabundance of electricity available for our people and our industries. And very interestingly, of that installed power capacity, as a country, we're only utilizing about 1.3 or 1.4 gigawatts. And that's a very interesting note to make mention of, because as you will see, that has actually enabled the opportunity of this hydrogen economy's advent in Trinidad and Tobago. I also want to pause, and it is very, very interesting, listening to the other presenters talk about hydrogen being good in its own right, just from a space of energy storage, of it being safe and clean. Why I think this is rising to the forefront on a global scale is the very clear need for climate action in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions. Trinidad, because we have a small population and a large, very robust energy sector, we have this dubious metric of being the second highest carbon dioxide emitter per person. And I think that has imbued me and many in the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago with this obligation to really be meaningfully in action around doing something in support of positive climate action. All that being said, the reason why hydrogen is really taking root in Trinidad and Tobago as this alternate source of generation, it's a business imperative. If we stop and think about it and we look at the facts, as this slide shows, Trinidad and Tobago's natural gas production levels have dropped over the past 10 years. And as you'll see when we get into the chemistry of it, the natural gas production levels is directly related to how much ammonia, methanol, and I dare say liquefied natural gas the country can produce and export, which is a key revenue earner for the country. And as the bottom slide shows, the levels of utilization of our existing ammonia and methanol plants have been on the decline, primarily because of the shortage or curtailment of natural gas available. Added to that, and it's an important fact to hold, and I think Thibault talked to it, our export is ammonia and methanol in the energy sector, and of course LNG, but let's talk petrochemicals for this presentation. Globally, the traditional ammonia and methanol markets are depressed. The price points are not where we as a country would want them to be. And interestingly, another side benefit of what NewGen is developing is the creation of a differentiated petrochemical product that is now green. And a greened petrochemical product now is a differentiator from the rest of the pack that will allow it to attract premiums compared to the traditional ammonia and methanol produced directly from natural gas. So just getting a little bit more into that, the big reveal of the challenge that Trinidad has is we're not short of natural gas per se, we're short of the hydrogen that is currently extracted from the natural gas. And as you can see, we as a country have the potential to consume over 2 million tons per year of hydrogen in the production of our ammonia and our methanol. The reactions are there. I won't go through them in specifics, but suffice to say, if there's a shortage in natural gas, there's a shortage of hydrogen. If there's a shortage of hydrogen, then our ammonia and methanol producers don't have enough feedstock to make their nameplate capacity. We're in fact talking in the realm of a shortage of over 400,000 tons per year of hydrogen that our Point Lisas estate is currently enduring and suffering from. And I'm sure some of you would have read the news about plants being shuttered and so on. It fundamentally results in a shortage of hydrogen. Now this, if you look at Mike's presentation and what Thibaut was talking about, this is a golden opportunity for hydrogen being created from alternate sources in Trinidad and specifically through the electrolysis of water. So I don't have to go into this much more than the previous speakers have, but suffice to say that if you take electricity and you zap water with the electricity, you will create the hydrogen and the oxygen. And the sourcing of this electricity is very important because if it is sourced from a green or a carbon neutral source of electricity, then it allows you to create a green or carbon neutral hydrogen. And just building off that, if I'm an ammonia producer in Trinidad and I'm now offered a source of green or carbon neutral hydrogen to make my ammonia with, well, guess what? Now I can make green ammonia. And that green ammonia, as I said earlier, can attract a premium. So not only am I benefiting from an additional source of hydrogen, in addition to the hydrogen coming from natural gas, now you have a hydrogen that will help you ultimately attract a more attractive price point for your product. And this is the powerful business imperative that has driven the NewGen project to where it's at. Again, very briefly, because I know time is tight, all this is saying is, as Thibaut said, this is an emerged technology. What we're talking, and it has various electrolyzer technology providers out there, each gallantly doing, on a daily basis, work to optimize the efficiency and the cost of the electrolyzer technologies. And it is making for a very competitive environment in a positive way for NewGen, because it really is allowing us to assess the best and the strongest technology offering available for the project being envisioned in Trinidad. So what is that project exactly? Well, let me start with the goal or the declaration, where we are committed to delivering the world's first large-scale hydrogen production facility in Point Lisas of Trinidad. And again, why we are saying that so directly is because of the business imperative that's driving the need for this additional hydrogen source to be found. And as you can see, this is a significant size project, in the range of the total spend on this project and other related projects is in the range of 300 to 400 million US dollars. We're looking at the production of about 27,000 tons per year of hydrogen. And currently we have a memorandum of understanding with one of the ammonia producers in Trinidad called TrinGen, which is part of the Yara group of ammonia facilities on the estate. And the intent is that as the stars align, they are interested in securing that 27,000 tons of additional hydrogen supply for their existing facilities. This is in the order of requiring in the range of 175 to 200 megawatts of electricity. And again, we've talked about it being carbon neutral or renewable or green. I'll come to that in the next slide. Very interestingly, the amount of water we're talking about is roughly in the same range that a typical ammonia plant currently consumes. And in the grand scheme of things, it's about 0.1% of the current water supply that is consumed by Trinidad and Tobago. So water is a very valuable resource, of course. We were just in a fortunate place that it is a manageable amount for this project that we're looking at. Really, in terms of where the project's progress to, we've done the pre-feasibility study earlier this year. For the past few months, we've been conducting a detailed bankable feasibility study, which is nearing completion. And we have HDF as a key partner to help with that whole exercise. And we've been very, very fortunate to have HDF as part of the development team for the feasibility study. We have an MOU with one of the power generators on the island, and I'll come to that in the next slide. And we've been very fortunate in securing some project development funding from local investors who really believe in what we're doing, both for the country and for the planet. And we're blessed to have been part of the effort to positively influence the policymakers of the country to embrace the concept of a hydrogen economy. And we are moving forward with them as we speak. So I think this is my last slide, and it's important because it really, paints the picture of what is the big differentiator that Trinidad and Tobago has going for it. If you're thinking about it, we're looking at, again, 175 to 200 megawatts of carbon neutral electricity. Now, if we were to try and get that purely from a solar facility, it would have to be huge. Thankfully, in Trinidad, we have a situation where we have, of course, the announced solar facility from Lightsource BP and Shell that will come on stream in the next couple of years. And that will amount to about 25 megawatts of green electricity. Now, it's being sized for 120 megawatts, but again, as the previous speakers have spoken to, there's daytime production and there's nighttime production levels, which of course come down. So on average, we would see ourselves securing about 25 megawatts from that facility. The lion's share of our energy or electricity would come from the utilization of waste heat that is currently emanating from some simple cycle power plants. In other words, we have power plants that take the natural gas, they burn it, they spin a turbine, and they create electricity. Let's call that gray electricity. However, in the process of that combustion, it generates a tremendous amount of waste heat. I think we're talking maybe only 30% efficient utilization of the natural gas. What happens in modern day power plants and in most other areas of the developed world is that you attach a steam turbine to that simple cycle, which then takes that existing waste heat and uses it to convert to steam, which spins a turbine that creates additional electricity. The challenge that Trinidad and Tobago has had is that because we already have so much electricity being generated, there was never a business case for our existing simple cycle power plants to tack on a steam turbine, which isn't cheap, to make more electricity because they never had a customer. The benefit of NewGen is we're putting up our hands and saying, you know what, we'll buy all of that electricity. If you add a steam turbine on and create that extra electricity for us, we'll buy it all. And the reason why is that if you think about it, there's no additional carbon being combusted with that additional electricity being generated. In other words, you don't have to put any more natural gas into the simple cycle turbine to generate this additional electricity. And that makes it carbon neutral. And that makes it valuable for a carbon neutral hydrogen product, which in turn can go down the value chain to become a carbon neutral ammonia product for Trinidad and Tobago's petrochemical sector. So that's the magic in the mix about the waste heat being utilized in a very win-win scenario. Not only does it make the energy efficiency of our power grid more efficient, it it's able to direct that efficiency towards the petrochemical sector that is in dire need of it for the production of additional hydrogen. And that is the business case that has been progressing us forward. And that is the business case that has us at NewGen confident that it will yield a world-class, large-scale hydrogen production facility in the next few years. And I will conclude maybe to start the conversation in, what does that mean for CARICOM? I mean, from my own limited perspective, I think just having a project of this size housed in the Caribbean will attract world resources to the region, from research and development to looking for further investment. We just see it as a catalyst for positive change to help drive the advent of the hydrogen economy in CARICOM. And I will end there, and happy to start be part of the conversation. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and looking forward to the balance of the session.
Thanks so much, Philip, for such an interesting project outline, and we wish you the very best. We are looking forward to seeing it come off the ground. So this term, we are going to be having some conversation amongst the panelists. And a number of questions have been popping up in the question and answer chat, especially about Mike's house. We will get down to some of the nitty-gritties, but we want to just take this at the global perspective now. Having worked in the Caribbean and from the experience from your countries, how can the Caribbean systematically go about developing a hydrogen economy? Because it seems like there are different business models. It seems like it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of strategic partners. So I will start with Thibault. If you can draw on your experience, and of course, Mike and Philip, please join in.
Well, I can tell you from my point of view that if you're going to have a plan for the Caribbean, it has to be able to be applicable to anywhere in the Caribbean. So not to islands that have specific resources, okay? And the hydrogen that should be generated in these should not be brown hydrogen. This should be all green, which means you have to do it from renewable sources, or at least blue, which is blue hydrogen, which is from landfills or naturally occurring waste products from organics.
Okay.
I would not go against what Mike said, but I would have a slightly different approach. I believe according to the size of the island and the actual presence of hydrogen off-taker or not, we actually are having a look at what type of project makes sense, right? I touched based on two stuff. Just to illustrate that. For example, a very small island in the Caribbean would reach very easily a very high impact when integrating a large-scale solar power plant, right, on the stability of the grid. So if I take an island that have a peak consumption of 25 megawatts, you can't put so easily a 10 megawatt solar farm, even so it doesn't cost so much, because it's not going to be stable unless you have a very, very much a resilient infrastructure with batteries and so on to integrate that, which comes with a cost, right? So if you want to decarbonize your island on the electricity sector side, for example, up to 50-60%, you need to have a look at using some intermittent renewable energy such as solar, some batteries as well that can respond quickly and help you with the virtual synchronous and ancillary services, right? And also some long-term storage, right, in order to counterbalance this. So this has directly this is something that can be implemented on small islands with like a great impact very quickly, right? But those small islands, for example, they don't need any hydrogen cars, right? They could work on hydrogen cars, but if like electrical vehicles are like more mature because they have such like small distances, they don't necessarily need like hydrogen cars at this stage, right? And if you have a look at like bigger islands, they might have some systems that are way better balanced, right? And they are not there yet when it comes, and there's a lot of efforts to go for like high penetration of renewable energy. But at the same time, having a project that would like support mobility for like buses going from, I don't know, San Juan to Rincon, for example, in Puerto Rico, is not something that is so easy to do with like a hydrogen bus, right? So of course, I agree with Mike. We need something to be like that we can like deploy everywhere. But right now, which are the projects that are feasible and make sense at this stage, where we are right now? It depends on each island, and if there is like a long distances to go with for the mobility, or if there is an hydrogen offtaker or inland, like for example, Trinidad and Tobago benefits from like a very large hydrogen consumption. And this is why the NewGen project came in. But the NewGen project can be like duplicated in another territory that has some waste heat and some hydrogen consumption, which is not something that it can be found like everywhere, right? So to me right now, even so, for example, the RENEWSTABLE power plant, which is actually same as Mike house, but like for very, very big scale and to support the grid, can be duplicated anywhere, right? But like you have to adapt the size. But like in terms of other potential project using hydrogen, it's really a case by case where, you have to take into account a lot of like things into consideration. When I take the Martinique project example, it's just because there is a refinery that has excess hydrogen that we value and deliver some electricity, right? But not every island has a refinery, and there's some refineries that are exceeding hydrogen and some others that require hydrogen for their own processes, right? So it's at this stage where we are right now, to me, I agree with Mike, you have to be able to duplicate in order to like tackle the whole market. But at the same time, like to prioritize the project that makes sense, like for each island, right? That's my vision.
All right. Well, just to comment there. So, I've had a number of experiences in the Caribbean, and I know what the resources are on different islands. Everybody's got solar, everybody has wind potential. Some of the islands have geothermal, and some of those have, other things like the project you're doing, which is excess from oil refineries. So, like I said, a plan that works for everybody. Right now, we're in an all-out, whatever we can do to reduce the carbon footprint of Spaceship Earth. All right. We're going to use, carbon sources at first because if it's a little less expensive to get it going. But in the same token, the infrastructure should be tried out and used on all the islands. The stuff that I do is vehicles. So I do stoves, I do cooking gas, heating gas, I do fuel for my vehicle. I power my lawnmower, I power my ATV, I power my motorcycles, all on hydrogen. So we have to get the appliances out there for people to use once we have infrastructure. Now you're talking about this, waste gas from the refinery. There should be a refueling station there for hydrogen cars, plus a way to offload that hydrogen onto tube trailers that you can fill portable refueling stations all over the island. It's very practical to make scooters, small cars, ATVs, all on hydrogen. And a lot of that's happening now. I've been working in this industry for 30 years, and I can tell you that, the vehicles, you have to have both of them together to make it work. You can't have one or the other. So both of these have to be done in consortium on real projects, first where they're the easiest to implement, and secondarily in all the islands. The infrastructure for the vehicles, for the refueling stations, for ATVs, for scooters, for cars and buses can be implemented on any and every island. You may be the producer for the initial to basically do liquefied hydrogen that you're sending to all of these islands, and offloading. that may be your commodity. That may be the way it works initially. Right now, Air Liquide in Arizona is doing the world's largest solar liquid hydrogen plant in the Nevada desert. They just got approved to do this off of solar because you need a permit approval from the utility companies. So they're looking to basically take that renewable hydrogen and distribute it to all the hydrogen refueling stations in California and get a premium for it. So, you know, you've got to look at further than where you are if you're going to make this whole thing work. We have to make it work as a system, and it's got to be an all out. I'm not looking for anyone to pick one technology over the other or one method over the other, but we have to understand what the end goal is. The infrastructure that I propose, or at least that I'm showing people here in America, is that it's an all out. Right now, I'm focusing on microgrids for all the burned out fire victims in the Northwest and in Southern California. Those electric lines are never going back up again. The utility is bankrupt for the third time, and a lot of people whose houses were burned out, they can't afford to put the grid back in. So now we are building, you know, microgrid fuel cells in a box that we're going to do 30 to 100 kilowatt in blocks and use those to power these places where the grid's not coming back for 3 to 5 years, if at all. So an island is pretty much the same thing as what we're doing for these homes. So we have to look at being able to do small stackable blocks. And then even if you have a central generating facility like I'm doing in Malibu, we're doing 5 houses on a block right on the ocean where I'm making one central hydrogen plant and we're piping it to 5 houses right on the beach. This is how you get, you know, the economy of scale. So you have to implement the the end that's going to be using it as well as the end that's generating it, and they both have to work together.
Thank you. I'm just going to piggyback on a question that came in from Anita Hankey regarding the need for policies and incentives from governments to facilitate the deployment of hydrogen in these various countries, because as you know, yes, we are a Caribbean region, but each island has its unique sets of regulations and policies and vision for what is happening. So I wondered, for instance, when Philip has embarked on his project, what sorts of incentives, what sorts of regulatory frameworks did you need? And do you think this is something that has to be looked at? Because even Mike, in an introduction I read on you, you had the first regulated hydrogen house, which speaks to maybe some years of having some regulations developed for you to be able to have these houses.
I had to develop the regulations. It was a 3.5-year battle to get the Department of Community Affairs to see my way and to get the municipality to change the rules to adapt this new technology. Basically, the New York Times got involved, you know, in seeing that I got the permit since I won a state grant to do this, you know. So, yeah, you have to have policies in place. And I've learned from my years of installing these hydrogen homes around the world that the best thing to do is to take them out of it as much as possible and make this a mobile generator rather than making it a stationary unit that's piece of real property. So that way, basically, it's a generator that's repossessable. So it's like a car in the driveway. The cars that I've developed here at the Hydrogen House will power 60 homes. There's a 114 kilowatt fuel cell in that car that I can put out 480 volt 3-phase 50 hertz. So I can power a whole neighborhood off of the vehicle. So your car now serves dual purpose as a drivable generator, you know, and basically a vehicle that you can drive. The technology is here. We don't have to go looking for it. All we have to do is implement it. It's here.
Just Philip, can you?
Yeah, to build off that, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the term you used, Mike, was it's all out, right? So
yeah, it's all out. Absolutely.
the space that I see CARICOM have to play with in terms of making the hydrogen economy real. I mean, just taking a step back, the specific benefit or advantage that Trinidad has is we've been dealing with hydrogen for decades, right? So the question
If you're in the oil refinery business, they've been dealing with it for 100 years.
So the regulation conversation is a little bit different. It's instead of getting it from natural gas, you're getting it from, for all intents and purposes, you're getting it from water. Yeah. However, I think what's more important is, or very important, is how does CARICOM leverage its own specific advantages to attract the enabling factors for a hydrogen economy? Because, you know, just to give some examples, you know, countries like Australia or Norway, their governments are contributing substantial capital towards the cost of their developing hydrogen production facilities. You know, Trinidad and Tobago is not in an economic position to do that easily, and neither, I would say, is most of the other Caribbean islands. So we have to look at what strengths we have to be able to, I would say, incentivize the advent of the hydrogen economy. Again, I can only speak for Trinidad. We're blessed by have had attractive industrial rate prices for electricity. And that's by and large what our economic model is being based on. However, it certainly would be beneficial to have an influx of capital to help bring down the overall capital cost. But I'm confident that we as a country will find a way. And while I don't know what that looks like for the other countries, I think one has to be open to how does one attract the technology and the capital and the projects to this region to incentivize the development of them. And it clearly can be done. I mean, if you look at the projects Thibault have outlined, he has successfully attracted the capital to countries that are, you know, geographically smaller than Trinidad and don't have a natural gas-based economy, but he's managed to make the business case a very real way. So it's probably good to hear from you, Thibault, what your thoughts are. Right.
But what right now, for example, I'm extremely happy that everybody speaks about hydrogen, and I think Mike is even more happy about that because he's been working on it for the last 30 years. But in the region, it hasn't been the case for the last 3 years. And first, there's a need for like a good perception of the hydrogen, which is like taking on now globally. But still on the ground, I experienced the fact that people are very cautious about hydrogen. So it's more like, you know, a perception thing, but this has a huge impact in discussions with potential equity investors. It has a huge impact with potential lenders as well. It has a huge impact with like political decision makers, even within like ministries that are responsible for taking decisions at this level. And I don't blame them for that, but it's just like, for example, Trinidad and Tobago has had like an industry that is using hydrogen all the time. It's not the case for most of the Eastern Caribbean islands, for example. And changing the perception is already what the CARICOM is doing through that type of event, right? And I appreciate that we organized that energy dialogue over this specific project, because it is key that we incorporate more and more the hydrogen topics and its business case application, because this is where I really focus on. I'm trying to find some like real business case that makes sense economically speaking and that can be compared to like other solutions with like a true advantage, right? Now, not in 10 years, like right now. In terms of what we can do at the CARICOM level, we would be very happy to have like access to grants and so on to make projects like more rapidly feasible or more economically viable, right? But usually there are some green funds that are out there ready to put some money on the table when there's a business case and when there's a project. But usually those green funds, and most of them, they would not help de-risking the sector unless there's a political support, right? So that's what you take, like, for example, like the CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, they have like they have some tools in order to put some grants on like project or de-risk project through like funding, right? At early stage when it's risky. We saw that, for example, with the geothermal in St. Vincent, right? Because the government of St. Vincent was convinced that the geothermal project was a good one, and they would be able to put some money on the table. So that's something that can be like replicated with hydrogen, with like business case that are even like more attractive. And it doesn't require like such a huge infrastructure and so on. It's just something that you can deploy like this as quick as it makes sense, economically speaking.
So just to get to the point here, as far as I can see, if you want to have something that already has a business plan that's successful, that's working here in the US, is the forklift industry. The ports are now using this to move all the trucks around. They're unloading all the freights. Like I said, Amazon is using this at all their distribution centers, Walmart, the US Postal Service. You know that, all these islands have import facilities where everything comes in and has to get offloaded and transported. So this is a winning business plan that you can already get funding from because it's already profitable. Why reinvent the wheel? Then this is a place to start off the infrastructure on all the islands with a workable business plan, not reinventing the wheel. So once you get the forklifts, then it's easy to go to the cars, the delivery vans, putting in refueling stations around the island. That's the beauty of these islands. You don't have to go very far. You have one hydrogen generating plant and you put in a bunch of, tanks that just refill that you drive around the island filling every day.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, convincing the political directorate is a bit of a task. Although I think all the Caribbean countries are committed to advancing their renewable energy uptake, I think that because hydrogen has been perceived as a pretty unsafe fuel or carrier, then apart from the countries that have large refineries like Trinidad, and it's in the vocabulary of the population, but in many of the other countries, they talk about hydrogen even at the level of leadership and decision making. There needs to be some convincing, and that is why I'm really impressed to see the various projects that have been done. And from Mike's home, and there are lots of questions about your home. I mean, is your electric stove, for instance, the stove that we did, the project that we did at the University of Technology, it was actually the hydrogen gas. So people wanted to know, is the stove at your home electric, or is it gas driven? People want to know about.
So sitting right behind me is my hot water heater and my dryer that run on hydrogen. So I converted the burners over to burn hydrogen. My stove upstairs runs on hydrogen, and my gas burners for cooking and my outdoor grill all run on hydrogen.
I think Dr. Wilson will be very interested in talking to you. I know that we have made excellent contacts and the dialogue has been very productive, but there's one question I am taking my advantage of my moderator's privilege to ask. A lot of the public utility companies, the electricity companies, are going into storage, but there is not much talk. Apart from what Thibault spoke about, Barbados Light and Power, they are not really looking at hydrogen at this point. Is it that the price point is not right?
That's not exactly true. About a month ago, Arizona is looking now at hydrogen for storage as they've had battery fires. There was a company called Extreme Energy in Hawaii that had 2 battery fires at a US military installation. That company is out of business. The problem with lithium ion batteries is they catch fire. They're not good in salt air and they're not good in heat. What do you guys have? All of the above. That's why these high energy batteries won't work. And then they're only limited shelf life. The only thing that keeps them from going thermonuclear is the electronics. So when you have an electronics failure, you have a battery that you cannot put out. All the you could take the battery and throw it in water, and it will continue to burn until all the energy is consumed, and it gives off toxic fumes as it's burning. Batteries are not the answer. They end up in the environment at end of life because they're not recyclable. Batteries are just going to further the problem another 10 years.
Thank you, Mike.
This cures it.
We are just about running out of time, but I would like to give each of you a minute and a half, 2 minutes, to make a final statement. I'll start with you, Philip.
I think given that this is a regional dialogue, I think there's one common word that, or two words I'd like to leave the speakers who are listening and sorry, the participants with. One is, that if there's a way of looking at that kind of common infrastructure that could serve all of the Caribbean islands, if there's some kind of common denominator, I don't know what it is, but if there's something that we can start collectively looking at, in that scenario of the hydrogen being available for production, for storage, for import, for export, I think that would be a good place to start. Decades ago when Trinidad started with natural gas, it would have been nice to figure out a way to get that exported in an efficient way and cost-effective manner to the rest of the islands. I think now we're at the ground zero of this new hydrogen economy, and let's do a reboot. Okay, what will it take for that to happen? And by the way, I'm not saying Trinidad is going to be the only source of hydrogen at all, but let's look at that interconnectivity between the islands and what that infrastructure would look like. And let's start now. And I think my remaining 15 seconds is for everyone to just be limitless in how they're looking at this. It is an emerged technology, but it's an emerging way of looking at it for this region. And let's start now putting our minds together on how this is going to work.
Thank you. Ibo?
So, okay, I'm a bit more down to earth as usually. I'm like looking at what makes sense. So what makes sense now in terms of like economics as well. For me, I think the first point would be to have some, and I will just like repeat it, but to have like some political awareness about the topic and the tremendous potential economic employment impact that it can have, especially right now, given the effect of the pandemic. So this is the right time to scratch your head about that, around that new hydrogen economy. I think there's since the oil boom, there's never been such a consensus between like the biggest like power around the world, around like the fact that hydrogen is the future, right? This being said, HDF is looking at like things that make sense right now or in the upcoming like few years, right? And I truly believe that the Caribbean have a potential that other countries, for a lot of reasons, don't have in terms of implementing solutions that make sense in the region, right? So that can be mobility inter-island, that can be mobility within island, that can be long-term energy storage, as I mentioned, like for like non-interconnected grid. There's a lot of things that the hydrogen can be used with ammonia. The ammonia can be shipped as well. There's a lot, and there's projects in development already, right? So my focus would be on the political support around this specific type of solutions, right?
Thank you. And finally, from Mike, before we hear from Dr. Gary Jackson, who will wrap up. Mike, you started and you have the last word on this panel.
All I can say is that the technology is there, and it's going to take everybody to get it out there. I'm available to anybody who wants to figure out the best way of implementing it and where to do it in the Caribbean. I've traveled almost all the islands there. I've worked for a lot of movie stars and wealthy people that were thinking outside of the box. And it's time now, where we can replace these old and aging, diesel generators with the next generation of power, and we can give those savings back to the people.
Thank you. Dr. Jackson, Dr. Gary Jackson, I ask you to unmute and say the final words while I thank the panelists who have given us such an excellent discussion this morning and have actually, I'm going to use that word again, provoked us into doing something for the Caribbean region. Dr. Jackson, over to you. Thank you, participants, and thank you, panelists. Dr. Jackson, please have the final word. Dr. Gary?
Thank you very much, Dr. Pratap Singh. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, indeed, it's provoking the thoughts. It has been a very interesting conversation listening to Philip, Mike, and Thibault. Thank you so much for that enlightenment. And Ruth, thank you for your introduction, speaking to the diverse challenges that are happening in the region. What I can say is that there's a lot of gray matter in this room. And with such gray matter, we should find a way to kind of utilize it to find solutions for these diverse challenges. But recognizing that innovation is going to be required to drive this change. Understanding also that the legislative and regulatory framework would need to be put in place to support the hydrogen economy. Understanding also that hydrogen seems to be a perfect candidate for the circular economy as we look at maintaining and reducing what we have and producing from this particular abundance of hydrogen that we have around us. In addition, it would be remiss of me not to recognize the amount of information that is out there, but also that information has not yet reached the public. It has not reached civil society to understand what are the benefits and opportunities that a hydrogen economy will actually give us. One of the things about the diverse challenges is also from what the participants, from what the panelists have been saying, is that we have to look at diversification, decentralization, distributed, decarbonization, democratization, and digitalization. So we recognize that all these are going to be required for this transformation that we so seek. There seems to be a lot of information about cost, and I know for any political directorate, they will want to know what is the kilowatt hour cost that is going to go to the man on the street. That is that information that they will want to know. I think hydrogen has proven itself to be a tested and proven technology. And I think we will need to understand how that works for the regional context. Recognizing that it deals with transportation, electricity, cooking gas, and the petrochemical industry, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago. But also, one of the things that we also recognize is that when you're developing projects of this order of magnitude, you need to understand the site requirements, the resources, and what resources we're getting the resource from. As you recognize, hydrogen can come from a lot of different places. Your waste energy, water, and anything like that where you have a hydrogen molecule. But you need an off-taker. So we have spoke about transportation, the cooking gas industry, electricity, but that has to be transactional, and that transaction would need to be a benefit to both parties, both on the supply side and on the demand side. And you need the right technology. And I see that the team has provided some technologies. Mike has provided technologies. Thibault has provided technologies, and so did Philip. But also the right team to put all of this together so that we can actually have a right hydrogen economy for the rest of the region. But to bear in mind, though, that within that, from what you have all said, you're going to need people, both on the technology side, on persons who are receiving this technology. You're going to need the right policy framework to be put in place to support the people and for the people to inform that policy. You need a right plan as countries go through an integrated resource and resilience plan to understand how this energy sector and how the electricity sector is going to be built out. There are a number of players and a number of technologies, and we have to understand the right mix of what is going to sustain our economies going further. One that is affordable, one that is reliable, one that is sustainable, and one that is climate resilient for our people. And we need to build the right projects, and the projects that are actually projects that are actually where you have it customized to the context of the countries that they are being deployed in, and partnerships. What is clear about what we have been talking about is to have the right partnerships. Right partnerships will drive the change for a better hydrogen economy. And I think that would wrap it up for me, Ruth, from what I've heard today. And I thank you very much for that intervention.
Thank you all for attending. We end on a good note. People, policy, plan, participation, and I'm going to add capital. Thank you all for your generosity in your time and in your discussion, your knowledge. And I say good afternoon to you all. Thank you.
Okay, stay safe, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Ruth. Thanks for this amazing statement, Dr. Jackson. And thanks for all the team. It was great to participate. Just we need to keep the momentum building, right?
Yes.
You guys get a chance, go out, take a look at my website, Hydrogen House Project, and see some of the really cool things we've built over the last couple months. I just finished a supercar, 0 to 200 miles an hour, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, and 1,000-mile range on hydrogen. It's called the Hyperion HX1. It's 5 years of my life.
Great.
If you guys get a chance, At War with the Dinosaurs documentary we just finished.
Okay.
Also on the website.
Great. Nadia Mohammed actually posted your website, some of the links to your information.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to Nadia, thanks to our Carolec partners, and thanks more than anyone else right now is Devon Gardner, the person who is a driver behind all of this. And we say thanks again to Devon and for the work that he's doing in CARICOM to move us along. Good afternoon.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks again.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Stay safe.
You too.